The Last of Us Part 2 is one of the most controversial, most divisive games of all time, and that much we all know. But despite everything, the game has won over 300 Game of the Year awards, it's one of the highest rated PlayStation titles, not by fans, but by the critics, and it broke many sales records. It's a game that, even if not universally loved, left a significant mark on gaming history. But did you know that The Last of Us Part 2 could have been really different? Today, I'm going to tell you all about cut content from The Last of Us Part 2. Some of you might already know a bit about this, but others will be seriously surprised by what you're going to hear today. Drastically different mechanics, new characters, major story changes that would have completely shifted the direction of the game, and a lot more content that was cut before it was even fully developed. So, without wasting much more of your time, just subscribe if you want to and drop a like, and with that said, let's get to it. We all know how traumatic and horrifying Joel's death was, and still is to this day. That torture scene that goes on for what feels like hours and ends with Ellie watching her own father figure being murdered right in front of her, it's terrifying. But within this story, Joel's death in its original version would have been a little different, and I'll let Neil Druckmann himself explain how it was supposed to go.
There's a doorway leading down to this basement, and Ellie sees Tommy, and he's just finished climbing out of this basement, and he's hurt bad, and he's rambling about something, needing to go after these people. Ellie's trying to ask him what happened, where's Joel, and he doesn't make any sense to her, and she starts to go downstairs. Tommy grabs her hand and tries to stop her, but he's too weak. She rips her arm away, and she heads down. And with each step, her heart races faster and faster as she sees this trail of blood. She opens the door, revealing Joel's mutilated body. And then shock just sets in, and she screams and tries to grab his body, and Dina comes and rips her away, and on that cacophony of sounds, silence.
That's right, Joel's death was originally going to be a bit more mysterious in a certain way. Ellie wouldn't have been there when it all happened. The only person who would have seen everything, who knew exactly what went down, was Tommy, which honestly makes me wonder if his role would have been even more important in a game. This idea of Ellie finding Joel's body tortured, completely mutilated, already dead, is something that, honestly, I don't even know if it would have been more or less traumatic. Overall, the scene would have been similar, Ellie going down the stairs and seeing his body, but one thing is for sure, at no point was Joel's death ever going to be left out of Part 2. That was something 100% locked in during the game's development. It was one of those core things that just never changed. Said, I know I love Joel too, but the story of the second game only exists because of his death. It's that typical cycle The Last of Us loves to explore. Violence leads to more violence. And actually, in the beginning, the idea wasn't that the big reason for Abby's revenge was Joel killing her dad, the Firefly surgeon at the end of Part 1, but this instead.
No, first iteration of Abby was you would have played with her as a kid in this kind of caravan of people that moving between places. And all of a sudden they get ambushed and they get shot and all these people are killed. And then you see Joel and Tommy. And you see them in the years when they were hunters. Mm-hmm. And she survived it. Like her dad moved her away, her mom moved her away. I don't remember the specifics of it. And she witnessed these two guys.
Joel and Tommy, during those 20 years as hunters, the time skip we never got to see, would have killed dozens of people in the caravan, including Abby's mother and father, and she would have been the only survivor, a little girl who managed to escape, that girl being Abby. And honestly, it wouldn't have been a bad choice for a revenge story, but they ended up going with a surgeon idea instead to give even more weight to Joel's final decision. The fact that by saving Ellie, he didn't just take away humanity's last possibility, with a very heavy emphasis, at a cure, he also caused his own death, a butterfly effect that didn't just change the world but destroy his own life too. And in the early writing stages of the game, the way we'd meet Abby would have been very different. She and her group were supposed to infiltrate Jackson, and little by little we'd get to know her, get attached to her, which would have made the shock of Joel's death even worse. You can even still see Abby's and Manny's name in one of the in-game to-do lists, something that the devs probably just forgot to remove, but they ended up cutting that idea because it messed too much with the game's spacing. We'd have to watch Abby sneak into Jackson with her group, gain Joel and Ellie's trust for several hours of gameplay, and in the end she'd betray them both. That would have made the story way more confused and dragged out, and Abby would have been seen as even more irredeemable for manipulating the town and betraying the people who welcome her. Basically, she'd be even more hated, not that I really like her now either. And in that version, that draft is when Joel's death would have happened with Ellie finding his body. And as we all know, Joel didn't get nearly as much screen time in this game as he did in the first one, but originally Joel was supposed to have a love interest, a woman named Esther. She was going to be introduced early in the game, and she and Joel would have gotten together during those 5 years between part 1 and part 2. An effect about her is that she lived about 2 hours from Jackson. It was revealed that during one of Ellie's flashbacks with Tommy and Joel, Esther would have gotten infected and Joel would have had to kill her himself. Just one more tragedy to the life of Joel. But she ended up being cut from the game because the devs felt there wasn't enough time to build a real bond with her, and the whole thing would have felt like filler. Still, give me all the filler in the world if it's about Joel. He deserved more in this game, and it would have been so interesting to see what Joel in love would have been like. But now let's get to the major change in The Last of Us Part 2, the one that would have changed everything, even a future sequel, and that almost made it into the game. Originally, Ellie was going to kill Abby at the end, but Haley Gross convinced Neil Druckmann to let her live. If you like Abby, that's fine, I respect that. I just don't. I would have preferred if Ellie, after everything she went through, had finished her cycle, but if you don't, that's fine. And no, I don't hate the game just because Joel died. I'm totally fine with that decision actually. I just don't like Abby, and that's okay too. In the original ending, after Ellie kills Abby, she returns to the farm like in the final game, but she ends up getting tortured by people who lost loved ones to Ellie during her time in Seattle. Once again, that cycle of violence, and that's when she would have lost her 2 fingers, not in the final fight. I don't hate the story of the game, I just don't really love it. There are things in it that for me personally, I'll never be able to like, no matter how good the writing is or the gameplay, whatever. And what really frustrates me is that it's almost impossible to criticize this story without people coming at you saying, you just didn't understand the story, you're only mad because your character died, blah blah blah. Like the game has some super secret subliminal message that only a genius could decode. I understood the story, I just didn't like a big part of it. Yeah, you read that right. The Last of Us Part 2 at the very beginning of its development had some ideas of including a kind of open world inspired by Bloodborne.
When we started out making Last of Us Part 2, Neil actually wanted to be very ambitious about changing the game almost entirely. That's weird. In the first 4 or 5 months, the game was actually kind of an open world inspired by Bloodborne.
Bloodborne had a very sort of an open space that sort of kept getting bigger and bigger as you explored.
We started out making it as different as humanly possible from the first game as we could, and then kind of dialing it back. The open world thing didn't work with the story that we were trying to tell and stuff.
According to the developers themselves, they were moving completely away from what the first game was, which is honestly kind of strange, but I believe that this idea of an open world wasn't your typical traditional open world. Just like they mentioned, it would have been something similar to how Bloodborne handled its world, something you explore bit by bit and covering more and more as you go. It's something that could have been really interesting, but the idea was left behind early in the project so they could focus more deeply on the narrative, and even on how the story could be told through the smaller open areas we do get in the game. Maybe that's an idea they'll explore in the 3rd game, who knows? There are a few here. One of them, which actually ties in with the open world we just talked about, was kind of a moral choice system. Basically, as we explored the world, we'd be able to come across certain people and decide whether we wanted to help them or kill them. And then later we might meet that same person again and they could either return the favor or not. But none of those choices would have impacted the main narrative, just optional side encounters. This was actually a mechanic that got cut from both the first and the second game, which honestly makes me wonder if we'll finally see it in the 3rd great game. Now, speaking more in terms of gameplay, the devs wanted more destructible environments. For example, bombs could blow up parts of walls or even the ground, which would have added way more dynamic gameplay, but that's the kind of thing that would have pushed the PS4 hardware way past its limit. And let's be honest, the game already pushed that console to the edge, so it makes sense why it didn't make it into the final version. Something that kind of ties into that is the rope. The rope in The Last of Us Part 2 is honestly one of the most impressive physics systems we've ever seen in any game, and at the time it came out, whoa. But originally the rope was meant to be way more important to the gameplay, even used as some kind of combat ally, kind of like what we see in Uncharted. And I think just by me saying that, you already get why it was scrapped. It would have brought a more action-heavy feel that doesn't really fit in with the grounded, realistic tone that The Last of Us goes for. And the game's AI, which is already insanely smart and honestly very impressive, was supposed to be even better. The idea was that enemies could plan ambushes in more detail, react more perfectly during combat against either Ellie or Abby, and that would tie in with a better stealth system. They even had a few extra stealth mechanics in mind, like being able to crawl under almost any car in the game, and even cover yourself in mud to blend in and avoid being spotted by enemies. And honestly, that would have been super cool, definitely something I'd probably welcome, but it's also not something that feels completely necessary. For me, one of the things I've always found super interesting is looking at early character concepts and seeing how different they could have been. Starting obviously with Ellie. She went through a lot of hairstyle variations, some were shorter, others longer. Same thing with her outfits. She had tons of different looks before they settled on the final ones we see in the game. Several different styles were tested. But for me, the most interesting concept is this one piece of art where we see Ellie with a dog, a companion that would have stayed with her throughout the journey. Sadly, it was cut, but maybe in the future. Joel also went through quite a few hairstyle tests, including some very weird ones, but by far, the character who changed the most was Abby. We all know her as the muscular, Viking-looking blonde, but she's a character that went through drastic changes.
I don't remember at what point we decided to go with someone like really kind of muscular and broad, but I remember once the idea came up, it felt very fresh.
Once we sort of nailed down the body of Abby, we played around with different ideas of how we wanted to accentuate her arms or not.
And there's something interesting in Abby feeling a lot like Joel.
Originally, Abby was going to be a lot skinnier, more similar to what Ellie is like, but the team decided to make her bulkier, more muscular, to give her the same tank vibe that Joel had, a character who can throw hands with anyone. It was also a way to really separate the gameplay between Ellie and Abby so it wouldn't feel too repetitive. But there was one character that barely changed at all from her original concept art, and that was Dina. Even in the early drawings, she already looked pretty close to the final version we got in the game. Other characters that had interesting concept changes were the Seraphites. In the early designs, they wore these cool, creepy cloaks, which honestly made them look way more sinister. It would have been really interesting to see that in the final game. And now, there were a few characters that were completely cut from the game. One of them was Esther, Joel's girlfriend that we already talked about earlier in the video. Another was Dina's sister, who Dina actually mentions to Ellie, but it's never really explained what happened to her. And then there's Kat, Ellie's ex-girlfriend, who actually appears but only in the lost levels. We'll talk about those soon. And she also shows up in the season 2 of the show. But aside from that, there weren't any more really major characters cut from the game, at least not any that have been revealed so far. There were, however, some types of infected that got cut, some of them kinda weird. Maybe they wouldn't have made much sense within the game's more grounded and realistic world, but from a gameplay perspective, they could have been really interesting. Yes, there was a multiplayer plan for The Last of Us Part 2, but with such a heavy focus on the game's story and how important the single-player experience was, the multiplayer project was pushed aside and eventually evolved into what was supposed to become its own standalone game, The Last of Us Factions. The idea was to bring back all the core modes from the multiplayer in The Last of Us Remastered, and of course add some new ones too. We even got some leaks, a few images showing parts of the menu and the interface, but the most interesting part, the game was going to include a campaign. According to Neil Druckmann, it was a story that could only be told in this type of game.
Is that this game is big.
Okay.
It's as big as any of our single-player games that we've done, and in some ways bigger. It's got a story. The way we're telling that story is very unique to this game. It's got a brand new cast of characters. It takes place at another place, another part of the United States.
It's like a city might be somewhat familiar, some people.
I'm sure our fans have already figured it out.
It would have been a co-op campaign, probably exploring the journey of some surviving Fireflies in their attempt to reach the WLF. It had the potential to be something really special, but even after all that investment, it ended up being cancelled. There are some lines of dialogue that are honestly really interesting to hear that were cut, mostly between Joel and Ellie, of course. Here's one that was supposed to happen during that flashback with Ellie, Joel, and Tommy. A really sweet little conversation between Joel and Ellie.
So I noticed that her hologram map thing, it's a moth. Was that where your tattoo came from?
Maybe. Judgy.
I ain't judging, just curious.
Liar.
Well, like I said, I ain't judging. I think the moth is pretty.
Very cute indeed. And here's another one to warm your heart today, another Joel and Ellie moment. This one would have taken place during Ellie's birthday. Yep, the best chapter in the whole game.
Hello, sir. How may I help you?
Was that like your British accent? Not obvious, actually.
Just play along, Joel.
One ticket, please.
That'll be $1 million.
That's an expensive museum. Here you go, $1 million.
Thank you. And here is your change. How much would a ticket actually cost?
Less than $1 million.
How much money did you have?
Way less than $1 million.
I miss these two together so much, but I've still got one more little treat for you. This one is between Dina and Ellie. I'm not sure exactly when this was supposed to happen, but judging by the tone and everything, probably sometime before Joel's death.
The day we met, you introduced yourself to me and Joel like you were the mayor or something. Because I thought you were cute. Shut up.
I hate you.
No, you don't.
Yes, I do.
No, you don't.
I love you.
I love you too.
I love these little lines so much. They're so personal, just a few seconds, but they stick with you for a long time. It's beautiful. I'll go through these a bit quicker because even though, yeah, they are cut content, they were later added into the game through the remastered version where we can actually play all 3 lost levels. One of them takes place in Jackson before the big dance party where Ellie and Dina dance. In it, we could play around with different minigames, mixing drinks, pretending to be a clicker to scare kids, and even having little interactions with some beloved characters. Another level is a sewer one, which would have taken place during Ellie's second day in Seattle. This one focused more on puzzles and very claustrophobic moments, and also on showing how truly traumatized Ellie was after Joel's death, including some scenes that reflected her PTSD. The last level happens after the entire Seattle journey. Already at the farm with Ellie and Dina, Ellie goes out to hunt a boar, and the idea here was to mirror what happened in the first game, that time skip where Joel was injured and then we cut very abruptly to Ellie hunting alone. Now it would be Ellie and Dina were both wounded and the time skip cuts to Ellie hunting again. And it's here we see once again how deeply traumatized Ellie still is, with heavy focus on her PTSD and how much Joel suffered and how much she's still suffering from all that happened. Very terrifying, to be honest. Out of all 3, I think this one might be the best, and honestly I wish they had kept it in the game. The Last of Us Part 2 was a game that tried to do more than it probably should have. With all the love people had, with all the love I still have for the first game, the story they wanted to tell in Part 2 was never going to work 100%. That's just my opinion, of course. If you disagree, that's totally fine, I get it. But one thing we all have to give this game is the praise it deserves for being technically almost flawless. It's one of the most beautiful games ever made, with top-tier gameplay, acting, facial expressions. Everything in this game is crafted down to the smallest detail, and for that, it truly deserves recognition. I love this franchise, but I only learned to love it because of these two, Joel and Ellie, and how special they were to me. I honestly can't fully put into words, at least not right now, how deeply I feel about these characters, but I miss them very much. I don't like to hate, but sometimes this game really tries to make me do it. There's so much I love about part 2 and a lot I just don't. But hey, that's just an opinion, right? Don't forget, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff, and as always, thank you so much for watching.
If somehow the Lord gave me a second chance at that moment, I would do it all over again.
Yeah. I don't think I can ever forgive you for that. But I would like to try.
I'd like that.